even means anymore. I'm Sherry Wolf. I'm going to moderate this discussion. I'm really looking forward to hearing what folks here have to say and what you all have to say. I'm a longtime revolutionary socialist, a member of the Tempest collective, which is putting this on. You'll notice that this is a bit of a hybrid event. We've got people joining us on Zoom because that is the era we now live in. I do ask that everybody keep their mask on throughout if you can. I know it's, uncomfortable, but COVID is worse. So there you have it. Basically, just a few minutes about the Tempest Collective, and people will be also circulating a hat to ask for donations because the room, of course, costs us money. Alas, we are not in a social society, and the LGBT Center costs a fair amount of money. We really are grateful that it exists, but it doesn't come cheap, just saying. And the Tempest Collective, if you haven't encountered us till now, I encourage you to find us online at tempestmag.org. I think you'll find our events that we have regularly, both online and in person here in New York and nationally, sometimes with other organizations and entities, whether it's Haymarket Books or unions, is a way that we see as contributing to a global conversation and debate to help develop a more serious and understanding revolutionary and far left and socialist left in this country. We believe as a network of people who exist, many of us in organizations of various sorts, whether it's DSA or other left collectives and initiatives. Our participation in Tempest, in the Tempest Collective, is an effort to build a revolutionary socialist wing within this country. We understand the urgent need for everything to change, for everything to be different, and for the impossibility of that reality ever coming about without a purpose and intention and groups of people coming together to sort through what is happening in the world today, what the historical implications are, and how we actually act in the world in the midst of what is a sort of cascading catastrophes, but also shining moments of hope, including for tonight, labor, which for the first time in my adult life is a more exciting discussion. So let's have it in terms of what rank and file organizing does look like, can look like, and needs to look like under, in particular, we're having this conversation obviously in New York City, but I don't want to dissuade anyone who might be calling in, phoning in from elsewhere to raise the issues. My day job is as the senior organizer of the Rutgers AUP-AFT across the river, which is heading towards, no secret, what could be the first strike of faculty, grads, postdocs, and adjuncts in the 257-year history of that institution. So I'm looking to learn from this conversation as well, because these lessons are immediately being put into practice for myself and many of you here, and other folks who are going to take advantage of listening to this online. So let's listen to folks. We'll each have about 12 minutes or so. I'll introduce them in order, and then we'll open it up for discussion, questions, and back and forth. And something tells me there'll probably be a beer at the end of this conversation somewhere nearby. Okay, that's it. Thanks. So that's not a clap thing. I didn't say anything clappable. Come up with something better than that. So we really happy to have Robert Cuffey here, longtime radical socialist organizer in DC 37, a city worker for the last 15 plus years. And I'll let him tell his own story.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, everyone, for having me here to be part of this discussion. As Sherry said, I'm Robert Cuffey. I'm part of the DC 37 Union Federation. I'm in Local 371, which I am obligated to remind you all is a mighty, mighty union, even though it doesn't feel that way sometimes. And with Josh and other people here, I'm also part of a rank and file caucus within DC 37 called DC 37 Progressives that formed in the midst of the pandemic and as part of the Black Lives Matter uprising. So I guess just to, contextualize things a little bit, in preparation for this, I went around reading things about trade unions. And one of the things I came across was this document from Leon Trotsky on the trade unions and the bureaucracy. And he wrote towards the end of his life where he said, there seems to be a trend, this is around the build up to World War II, that the union bureaucracy is becoming more and more part of the state infrastructure. And obviously Trotsky didn't survive to see the end of World War II and is not here today. But I think in many ways, if we look, we do see, right, that the unions, at least in the United States and in many other places, are more and more part of the infrastructure of the state, and it's hard to tell them apart, not just in a theoretical way, but also in a practical way. My coworkers, for example, if you talk to them about the union, I was talking to some coworkers about the union today, and what the union is supposed to be good for is like the kind of business service type of stuff, going to the dentist. And one of my coworkers is complaining about her inability to see the dentist because she can't hear back from the union's welfare office. And some said the union is no good, but other coworkers of mine say flat out that they can't tell you the difference between the union and management. And I think this is where we really are. In Guyana, where I'm from, for example, when I did some advocacy with the Sugar Workers Union, one of the things I found out is that the general secretary of the Sugar Workers Union is also a member of parliament for the ruling party. And while in the United States, the lines are not that blurred, there is nonetheless, this close alliance between the labor movement and the Democratic Party in this country that goes back many decades. You can pretty much say that the labor movement in this country is part of like a general coalition with the Democratic Party. But in New York City, in our current context, it takes on like really obscene proportions, especially with Eric Adams as someone who's risen through the ranks of the Democratic Party in the state, a Democratic Party that through the pressures of the civil rights movements and other things have incorporated a large part of the Black middle class. I remember in the run-up to the last mayoral election, I was actually able to make it to one of my delegate meetings for Local 371, and we were told there was a surprise guest, and lo and behold, it was Eric Adams, who they were announcing that they were endorsing because he, like me, apparently is a union member and a man of the people. And he did get on there and he literally said, I am here, you should support me because I am you. I'm not going to go into a long thing about how cops are not part of the working class. However, I think Eric Adams' time in office has shown demonstrably that he is not part of the working class. And even if he once was, he's made clear who his friends are and what his interests are in aligning with the city's real estate and other capitalists. But Eric Adams is, for the most part, like if you take seriously what the union leaders have been saying, this is like the promised land. This is what we were asking and waiting for. Like I've worked for the city since 2008. At the time, Bloomberg was the mayor, and I remember my union president said, "We cannot negotiate with this guy. Like he's a Republican, he's a billionaire, he's a hardliner. He does not understand the struggle of working class people. We're gonna wait until he's out of office to negotiate our contracts. We're gonna get somebody reasonable." And we got de Blasio. And if I remember correctly, I think some of you were at that march where we were opposing de Blasio's threat to cut 20,000 public sector jobs because of the budget shortfall due to COVID. And those cuts were actually prevented by the unions, including DC 37, actually offering up their welfare payments to the city to say, take our welfare payments, pay it back when you can, please. Don't fire anyone. Not a protest was held, not a rally, not a public meeting. All of the traditions of the union movement that are class struggle unionism, that are social justice unionism, have been far out the door. Instead, we get a lack of transparency where, I'd like to think I'm a relatively intelligent person and interested in the affairs of my union. I cannot tell you what stage of negotiations we're really in at this point as our contracts have expired, except to say it seems that the bar has been set so low that we cannot expect any kind of raises that stay with inflation, nor can we expect any real kind of wages. If we get a 1% raise, I'll be surprised, to be honest. And the big fight now is to hold on to free healthcare for public sector workers, while at the same time, and Bobby will get into this more, they're stabbing the retirees in the back with the Medicare Advantage plan that has no legal basis, and if you care about whether people live or die, is unethical. In addition to that, I see the comrade who advocates for the New York Health Act is here. The cities union leaders are aggressively opposing the New York Health Act and any kind of universal health care by saying that would take away from public sector workers the free healthcare we have now. And having healthcare as a bargaining chip is something that's very important for the leaders of our union, unfortunately. And people say, for example, like, why don't you, support the New York Health Act? And then you don't even have to worry about bargaining for healthcare. But in reality, I think they're just using bargaining for healthcare as a front for the fact that the unions are not in a way deliberative. They don't speak to their members to get input, and they're not representative of the larger working class, just so that these very narrow interests that serve to keep city workers away and hermetically sealed from the rest of the city's working class. And I think especially in the current political situation we're in, the financial situation where working class people are paying $8 for a case of eggs, it's really hard to then say to people, join our fight to preserve my free healthcare, when a lot of times, as city workers, our relationships with members of the city are not always positive. Like, I work for the city's administration for children's services. Child welfare workers are not kindly looked upon in these times. And to be able to kind of build the solidarity with those people means also fighting for their material interests. And sadly, there's like very little of this going on. At my job, for example, like, we are so short-staffed that we struggle on a daily basis to cover the cases that we have. There's people out sick. The COVID policy is terrible. Some of you may know that at my workplace, I spoke up against things like them giving us expired hand sanitizer in the middle of the pandemic, and it was rewarded with a few disciplinary hearings for that, because allegedly I skipped the chain of command by speaking to the news. And I think, the city's attempt to amend the administrative code to force in Medicaid for all is like a great example of what is, at least what I think should be the key and wedge issue here, which is one of healthcare. Because the city always tells us about how they're, quote unquote, or our union tells us they're fighting for the afterborn, right? They're fighting for the workers who've not yet joined the city, who are not yet part of the union movement. But really and truly, if they're pushing through a retiree health plan that lowers the standard of healthcare and limits the number of doctors you can see, they're not just doing it to the retirees, they're doing it to those of us who are currently working and hope to retire someday, which is a distant dream. And they're doing it to those who will be hired. So I fully understand why some of my coworkers are confused about the difference between management and the union. And it's often hard to pull that conversation back, to stop it from being an anti-union conversation, right? Because beneath the surface of the official labor movement, in every workplace, in every community, there's the self-organization and self-activity of the working class. It's our job, I would say, as socialists, to tap into that in a meaningful way and articulate how in our specific historical circumstances the workers are doing that. The best example I would say right now is the Retirees Association, the way in which they have pushed back. Because if the retirees just sat down and said, okay, do what you want, like, generations of people would be stuck with this bad healthcare. But they've protested, they've filed petitions in court, and they've attended city council hearings and done everything they can to stop that. And they're fighting on behalf of the whole working class. And I think that's our task at this time. I don't want to take up too much time. I would say the biggest struggle, I would say, as far as how we, I guess, tap into that demographic, is getting rooms like this to look more like the city's working class. One of my comrades contacted me earlier this week. I think the phrase she used was standpoint epistemology, which confused me until I looked it up, but was basically saying, like, have you encountered leaders in the union movement and people in the union movement who dismiss what you have to say because you don't look like them? And we know here in the city that the union movement is disproportionately Black and brown. And this is clearly something the union movement does here. Yeah, this is something that the union movement does here. They will dismiss any kind of criticism to their left if it's not coming from people who look like them. And then when people like me stand up and say, well, you know, it's not an all-white crowd, they then buy into that kind of racism. They say, oh, well, you're just, you know, brainwashed by those people. So I think we have to recognize challenges in the way in which we are organizing. I think some of the recent public sector rank and file meetings we've had across unions and across rank and file caucuses have been great first steps in doing that. I think we have a meeting coming up on the 18th that I would invite people to. And that really is the task right now. I think there's a new normal where shit is just crazy that we've accepted, and there has to be some way to push back and say, like, we can't accept this as normal, and that, you know, they don't call it the class struggle for nothing. And it's not a one-sided struggle. Like, the working class will not sit down forever and be pounded upon. People won't sit down forever and watch the NYPD get funded while sanitation, education, and everywhere else gets defunded. And we can bring back the spirit that we had in 2020. I'll just end by saying, I do remember at the beginning of the pandemic in the city, people were scared. Really tough to go outside. I was organizing for May Day. This was before George Floyd, and like the most we could muster was a car caravan because people didn't really understand the dynamic. But less than a month later, there were hundreds of thousands and millions of people on the street fighting for justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. So it only takes that kind of spark. And I think we have to instill in people that kind of self-confidence, both individually and collectively, to say that, you know, as bad as things are, there is a way forward.
Yeah, just introduce you. That's great. And by the way, I am doing whoever just texted me, I am doing the timekeeping. Olivia Swisher from the Movement of Rank and File Educators in the UFT, right? The teachers union in this city, is going to speak next. Yay.
Hi, I'm Olivia Swisher, more UFT. So honored to be between Robert and Bobby, who I've had the pleasure of organizing with. Robert and I through public sector rank and file. And Bobby, as last year we took on the Unity Caucus, which has been the leadership caucus of our union since the founding of our union. And we worked together as part of United for Change. And it was a big, giant campaign. And I have to say, you don't mess with retirees. Retirees, you don't mess with them. And I learned a lot. Yeah, and power. And I've learned so much from both. And so I'm excited to be between both of you. Like I said, I'm a part of More UFT. I'm my school's chapter leader, which is like a shop steward. I'm on the UFT's negotiating committee. I'm on the More steering committee as well. And like I said, I'm a part of public sector rank and file, and we do have a meeting next Wednesday. We hope that you attend. My journey as being a More member is actually relatively new, and it's kind of building off what Robert just said. I am a school teacher, and the COVID pandemic hit, and it was really like, where's the union? And at the time I was not steward, I was not chapter leader. I was rank and file member, and we weren't having union meetings at my school. We weren't getting information from Mulgrew, surprise. It was pretty silent. And what Robert was bringing up is that it was also very scary. And at the time, within 72 hours, our working conditions changed. We were told you have 3 days to take what you do inside of a classroom and make it happen online. Not to mention, the Friday the 13th of March, in my homeroom that had 33 kids in it, there were 12. So parents were already taking their students out, or I work in Sunset Park, which was one of the hardest hit communities in 2020, or people were sick. My colleagues were sick. We had no idea what was going on. It was terrifying. We were not getting any information from anyone. And that was one of my biggest learnings, is that people need information. And that is my, like, as a chapter leader now, that's what I try to do. Like the union doesn't provide us a lot of information, especially about the healthcare issue. And so I think the more informed our members are, they are able to make choices. When we don't give people information, we're keeping them in the dark and we're keeping them disempowered workers. And so in that 72 hours, I went to my chapter leader. I was like, what? I just worked literally 16, 17, 18 hours. I'm calling all of my families. I'm hearing that they're, don't have what they need. Nobody has Wi-Fi, like nobody even has a device. It was awful. And I actually hate even talking about it, but that's what really radicalized me. Because I really was just a day-to-day school teacher worker. And that was really how I went through my life. But I couldn't stand by and watch as my colleagues were hurting and my students were hurting. And so More UFT, which had been around since the early 2010s, was the only information source. They were posting what we needed, including like digital classroom stuff. They were about to call a sick out. They were putting out information that our union should have been putting out. And so one of the questions is about like rank and filers and how informed are they, or do they know about our working class struggle? And I think that as workers, they do, whether or not they have the lingo or the jargon for it. When you're in a pressure system, and as Robert said, shit is crazy. Yeah, lockdown's over, but what is happening in our schools right now is wild. My school was defunded by $500,000, which might not sound like a lot, but we only have less than 500. Well, we have 500 students. That's our cap. Every day this week, I have gotten a new student, no new funding, because the funding window closes October 31st. Our new students are mostly seeking asylum. We have a lot of need. We need to care for people. You cannot learn if you're not feeling cared for, period. But we were defunded and we're not getting that money back. We took them to court. We actually won. But the city said, well, it would be too big of a deal to go back and forth and get the money back. So this year, you're just going to have to keep working the way you are. And the problem with that is we showed, and the union allowed for us to keep working without the funding we needed. We showed that we would do it. And that's one of my biggest issues, is that our union, similar to DC 37, public sector unions, they are the arm of the management. And even in our meetings about our contract, it's not what you would dream it to be, which is like, let's get it all. Let's get this. Let's fight. Let's get what we deserve. It's neutral. It's like bland. It's a neutral color. It's not a vibrant fight. And a contract fight should be a vibrant fight. It should be like, what do we deserve? And so with rank and file members, I kind of just tune the union out. I participate in the union, and I think that's important. I know some people are like, would just operate separate and go their own way, but I do think it's important to stand up in union meetings and ask the questions that, I get called an MFer for in front of everybody, and it's embarrassing. I've been told to leave by my union colleagues, you probably remember it's a violent space if you ask a real question, at least in the UFT. So, and it's also like abusive, but you have to go. You have to go and agitate, because there are people who hear you and they're like, wait, she's not asking a wild question. She's asking, can we do X, Y, and Z? Wait, why were we told we have 72 hours with no training to create a digital classroom? I'm an art teacher, middle school art teacher. I never even used Google Slides. I never used anything digital because I believe in hands-on making. So now I'm sitting there like doing online tutorials, and we just weren't compensated. Our time wasn't valued. And right now, it still makes me, I'm like, ugh. We worked our spring break. We're lucky we get spring break. We worked it. The union allowed us to work. We were already home. And what do? They gave us 7 vacation days. 7. That's not That's not money. And so for my colleagues who've been working 25 years in the system, they missed out on like what they should have been owed. You know, it's just the union is constantly defending the city and working with the city. And so with the Adams administration specifically, I believe that we have to fight. And I believe it because, like what Robert was saying, we're as public sector workers, we're fighting for the city that we want to live in. I have 6th graders who cannot read, 11 years old, cannot read. I don't want to live in a future where people don't read, can't read, haven't been taught to read. I want to live in a future where people can read and can make informed choices, not be asleep and just be told, oh, go to work, do this, be like just a little zombie. No. And that's like what our fight should be as public sector workers is what city do we want to live in? What do we want for ourselves? But more importantly, what do we want for everyone around us? And what do we want for young people, elder people, everybody? And our union, though, does not think that way. They are more geared towards us, the UFT. They talk about DC 37. They talk about all the unions, how we're the best. But what are they really doing? I mean, they're just placating us by making us feel like, oh, we're the best, but they're not actually doing anything for us. And so within MORE, one of the things we try to do is we really provide information and support people. You don't have to be chapter leader to organize your chapter. You can be anyone. And I think that providing people with those skills, now the UFT would be like, wait, no, only the chapter leader can do these things. But that's a failed system because I'm a chapter leader and it's too much work. I need a collective group of people all bought in. And my school, my coworkers, they're regular teacher people, but they can be and have been radicalized. Last year, we, without the union, did many actions within our school, small actions and eventually a sick out, which, you know, is technically not supposed to happen. But everybody did it. We just called out sick. And did I think everyone was going to do it? I didn't know. But then I took a poll, little test, who's going to do it? Everyone was like, well, if they're doing it, I'm doing it. That's how a union works. If they're doing it, I'm doing it. I don't want to be here being the scam. I want to be with my colleagues. And it was a really big deal. And it was a big moment for solidarity. And guess what we were sticking out for? Masks. We just wanted some masks. That's what we wanted. And when we went to the union, they're like, oh, well, you know, they should be providing PPE. Should is not must. Should is not must. Same time, Omicron. Last year, Mulger, we advised Adams that we think we should take 2 weeks and be remote. We have the capability to go remote. We've done it. I'm sorry, if you're a union boss, you're not advising, you're demanding. It's not, they should have, it's must have. It's not ask, oh, we advise, it's demand. That's how a union works. And what I really believe is that within my chapter and with other people's chapters, it's about your relationships. So, okay, the union's saying we have to go to work without proper masks. We don't have to. We don't. But it does take a lot of one-on-ones and a lot of building trust and a lot of work. But I do believe it's possible. And I think if we want a city where public schools still exist, because the privatization is happening rapidly, literally rapidly. If we want public schools to still exist, then every single person has to be ready to fight and fight for real. That's just how I feel. I'm gonna end there.
Thanks so much, Olivia. Our last speaker, actually, I should say something. We're really, I'm terribly sorry that our nurse speaker, Sean Petty, is actually too ill tonight to either attend remotely or be here physically. One of the realities of being a nurse is that you get sick a lot. And it's unfortunate we couldn't hear if there is anybody on the call or hear who is a nurse or a member of NYSNA. Obviously, there's two of their hospitals on strike. It would be great to hear from you during the discussion. So our last speaker, in terms of the presentation before we open up, is Bobby Greenberg. And really, I'm excited to hear about this because we don't hear anything and you read almost nothing about this battle going on that's affecting huge numbers of New Yorkers who are older. And if you go to Florida, you hear about a lot of it because that's where a lot of teachers have retired to. And that's where I actually, in all honesty, first heard about it from my mom's friends sitting around there. This was the topic of conversation around the table. So please tell us, Bobby is a member of the Cross Union Retirees Organizing Committee, and he's going to talk to us about what's going on. Thank you.
Hi. I just want to say, Robert, thank you very much for that big frame. And Olivia, the active teachers, the in-service people give us tremendous, retirees, tremendous energy, because just realize that Olivia is here tonight after working a day under these conditions is impressive, and multiply that by 60 some odd thousand. It's incredible that the in-service people can actually fight on top of the drain of the daily work. It's incredible compared to us who are just chilling. So retiree advocate, which I'm one of the coordinators of, by the way, I have two pieces on the current issues. You can be free to take them. We go back a long, long time in this union. And we represent, not by vote, but if you could look at votes within the chapter, we have a very large chapter, 60,000 members. And we got 30% of the vote in the last election, which is a high watermark for us. And this was before this present crisis. There's no credit. And we developed, as Olivia indicated, a tremendous coalition of all of the opposition groups in this UFT to work together very well. I really, I got to admit that I was saying, how are we going to work together? Look at, it's not that the differences are so great. They really aren't. But, our history is, there's so much, but on program was the first, boom, boom. And amazing. I was at those meetings and how the bigger picture came in and people's better spirits, in terms of that's the past. Let's see what we can do in this union now. And we really broke through as a coalition. We worked very well together, and we won the high schools, which is our always our strongest division. And so we won 7 members of the executive board. Executive board is of 100 members, but but it's something because every other week, every other Monday, they stand up one by one and hit and hit and hit. And we publish that among the members. We get that word around. These are 7 valiant people, because it's not like a friendly group like you guys. Let me tell you, those people are very, very tough to face. Okay, they make it very difficult. So that's just a frame. We've been involved in many struggles of retirement. I also want to say that there's another, we're the oldie on the block, but the newbie is really CROC, the Cross Union Organizing Committee, which came out of this present struggle we're in. And it is just what it says. It's members of different public sector unions who are in this fight against privatization of healthcare. So I know it's a pleasure to learn and to work with the DC 37 retirees. DC 37 has a different structure with retirees than we do. They have a separate organization, DC 37 retirees. They are a separate organization. They're not an organic part of the union. So there's a certain kind of independence, which they have not always as a group used. Members have individual, but the leadership has not. But within the UFT, we are an integral part of the union. We vote. We vote for our union officers. We should have 60,000 votes, but they have to limit us. And we, Retiree Advocate, has always been for a limitation of our vote. If we were not limited because of our numbers, we would dominate the whole union. We the retirees would elect the leaders who would then rule over the active teachers. So we are for sharp limitation. We in fact are critical of the union for limiting it at, I think it's 22,000, something like that, in there, We are for limiting it even further because we still have a disproportionate influence in elections. We also, I just want to mention the other divisions. We increased in all of the, we almost made the junior high schools, which is my baby. I started teaching in junior high school. I started in 1966, and was very involved in organizing. And in 1968, during the strike, I was principal of my school. The school, 3/4 of teachers were on strike. 25 of us broke in and went over the school. I don't want to go into that. That's a long, more than 10 minutes, long history. I want to talk about the present struggle we're in, which is the fight for against privatization of our healthcare. Public workers in New York City won by giving up benefits, by giving up salary. We won free healthcare, basically. We can pay if we want to. There are certain plans you pay for. Very few teachers or very few public workers take those. We take the free plan, which is excellent. When you retire, 60, and we can retire, sorry, we can retire 10 years before 65. So, but at 65, we get Medicare, and then we get what we call senior care, which is to cover the 20%. So we pay nothing, basically. And up till now, up to 2 years ago. And they tried to really, and they hit us with a secret, there was a secret plan, which we didn't know about. We found out about someone sitting on the MLC, which negotiates for all public workers. We found out by just someone sitting there, overheard, hey, they're working on a plan for privatization. And then we blew it. We blew them. And then the whole thing began. So we had a number of marches. We've had demonstrations. We demonstrated. This is a tremendous unity with in-service people. At every delegate assembly, which we have once a month, we demonstrated outside, pushing this and other issues. And this is not only a retiree issue. And this is something we have won the retirees on this. We have from Florida to Israel to everywhere. We really have California. We've gotten the word out. Retirees are aware of what's happening, but in-service people, many are not. So that's something we have to, and we are working on that. It affects them. First of all, it's already first-year teachers don't have the health care that the rest of the teachers have. They they started on both ends, retiree end and the first-year teachers end. But it affects everybody because if this system, healthcare, is privatized, what that means is that the working teachers, the in-service people, will be forced into a privatized plan as well. Now, is this illegal? No, it's not illegal. It's perfectly legal. And that's where maybe that in the original Medicare law, there is provision, and it's built into the law that because it was a compromise law, the private corporations were sitting at the table and they got a big chunk. And it satisfied them for a while, but it doesn't anymore. Now they want to have the whole system. And the way they do it is through the law. The law allows them to manage the system, to get paid to manage the system. So Medicare pays a private corporation to manage the whole system. The Medicare, 80%, and now the city care is a little different. So what we have is this, in a way, a weakness in Washington that goes back for decades. And then administration, always in money problems, city administration. So where are they going to cut? They got to cut at the weakest end. And they made a big mistake. They thought that the retirees were the weakest link. They were wrong. And so we have held them through all kinds of ways, demonstrations. We have tried everything. Sit-in is next. I'm sorry. We can't give that away. But we have held them for almost 2 years, okay, from implementing this plan. They keep pushing the goalposts back. Well, we're going to implement the latest goalpost that they announced at the hearings on Monday was July, I think June 28th, June 30th, something like that, July 1st. So they keep pushing that back. We've held them for 2 years, and by holding them for, so we have our plan. Just the way it was 2 years ago. They have been fight. So now the fight is at the city council. There is a city council, and people should be aware of it. It's called 12126. Very easy to remember for me. Just remember 12. 12, and then half of 12 is 6. So that's it. That is a city ordinance that says that the city must provide a free health care plan for all city workers, active, retired, and their families. It's there. It's in that one. That's what we're holding, and that's been there for decades. They want to change that now. This is the full court press on changing that. Once they change that, then they feel that they can go all the way. We had, I guess I'll finish with this because yes, I knew you were going to do this. That Monday we had, which was our last action so far, and it's been 2 years. There was a hearing of a committee that to change this ordinance. The pressure is the Metropolitan Labor Council, the union leaders, and the city, and behind the scenes the corporations, to pass this city ordinance to amend this or end it or change it. So we organized. By the way, the "we" is not retiree advocate. The retiree is one of a coalition. Okay, we're not the largest. We were the first in battle, but the largest is actually a group of retirees that carried the court case, which won twice. Okay, and they're mostly other retirees, not teachers. There are teachers there, but mostly it's cops and firefighters. So now that coalition has gotten to the Republican members of the city council, and they are all on our side. This is amazing to me, blow my mind. I said, oh, wait a second, we just watched these hearings and then suddenly all the cops and firefighters are on our side. And they got directly to their members and boom, there they are, they're on us. Some of the liberals are not. So we have a fight. We're at, we got to get 26 votes. I think we have 21 to 23 with some sitting on the fence. We might make it, we might not, we'll see. But so that, I just want to end with that. At that hearing, the hearing lasted 12 hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Monday. There were over 500 retirees, over 500. And over 300 of them had written testimony that they submitted. And one after another. Well, we weren't allowed to speak for 3 hours. The first came the city for 2 hours, and then the unions. But when we finally got to speak, it went on and on and on. They never got to everybody. But it was a tremendous, first of all, it was tremendous in numbers, militancy, and in unity. Just to have city workers from DC 37, from UFT, from PFC. And by the way, I just want to shout out to Professional Staff Congress, because they have been one of the only unions, the first unions to break from that unholy coalition. And in fact, they have submitted a plan of how you can get the money without taking it out of the retirees. Okay, sorry I ran over.
No. Thank you so much.